Straight swords may seem like the most straightforward weapon type in Elden Ring. After all, the straightforward sword is perhaps the first weapon that springs to mind when considering a medieval weapon. Elden Ring's straight swords, on the other hand, feature among of the more distinctive designs in the entire game. These weapons aren't just bizarre for the sake of being weird, they can deal out a lot of damage with both ordinary assaults and their special abilities. The best straight swords you'll come across while exploring the lands between are listed here. Early game straight swords with natural intelligence scaling include the Lazuli Glintstone Sword, Carrion Knight's Sword, and Crystal Sword. They are all somewhat strange. They are peculiar for sorcerers to wield because they scale better with strength than intelligence, and they are typically outperformed in terms of damage by standard straight swords, with the magic affinity. The Lazuli Glintstone Sword, however, is most likely the best of these. In Glintstone Pebble, it deals the least damage, but it also has the best weapon skill. It is a fantastic sidearm for a pure sorcerer, because its strength and dexterity requirements are so minimal that even the astrologer class can utilize it without devoting any levels to those stats. In Raya Lucaria or Caria Manor, where you must farm the Lazuli sorcerers, it can be difficult to get your hands on it. In most respects, Golden Epitaph's special weapon skill, Lest Rites, is inferior to the Golden Vow incantation. Both of them provide an attack benefit, but the Last Rites buff is weaker and lasts less time. Naturally, you cannot stack them on top of one another. Golden Vow does not, however, do something that Last Rites does. It increases damage against undead opponents by 100% and stops them from reviving. Try Golden Epitaph if you're having difficulties with skeletons or deathbirds. Use a Stonesword key inside the Azuria hero's grave in the capital outskirts to unlock it. The straight sword of the Lordsworn is a good straight sword all around. It doesn't stand out in any particular way, but it excels in a lot of practical ways. It has a respectable range and damage for a straight sword, and may be equipped with a variety of Ashes of War. Lordsworn straight swords are a dual-wieldable weapon that you can start the game with if you farm the Godric soldiers that you'll encounter all across Limgrave. This is a fantastic option if you want a straight sword you can adapt to a number of scenarios. The coated sword resembles a lightsaber in many ways. It is quite long, cuts through shields, and isn't impeded by foes like the miners, whose straight sword blows would typically bounce off of. Unblockable Blade, the weapon's entertaining weapon skill, stretches the blade in a broad slash that is, as the name says, unblockable. Unfortunately, the coated sword also completely deals holy damage, which many of Elden Ring's most challenging bosses can resist. Although you should have alternative ways to defeat those bosses if you are utilizing a pure faith build, it's never enjoyable to have your primary weapon break. Go to the Fortified Manor in Lanedell to obtain it. The two fingers in the round table hold is located in this chamber. The coated sword, like many other weapons in that location, is simple to overlook, so make sure to get it before you face Malekith. The Regalia of Eachade has a peculiar flaw in that it is actually worse than the Merace Executioner's sword. Both weapons are mostly used for Eachade's Dancing Blade, a weapon skill that propels your weapon forward, while spinning it like a drill. Regrettably, the Merace Executioner's sword's variant simply does more harm to the Regalia. The Regalia is not a poor weapon. Despite being inferior to a superb weapon, you can utterly destroy bosses if you land the weapon skill after using buffs that trigger with quick hits, such as the Winged Sword Insignias, Millicent's Prosthesis, or the Thorny Crack Tier, a lot earlier than the Executioner's Sword, which is obtained by beating Elimir of the Briar and the Shaded Castle. You can also locate the Regalia. One of a very small number of weapons that can accumulate Scarlet Rod is the Rotten Crystal Sword. Furthermore, there are only 2 such weapons that scale with intellect, making it even more unique. Although the Rotten Crystal Sword is a rather specialized weapon, your options for inflicting Scarlet Rot are so constrained that its mere existence makes it a viable option. Its major drawback may be that you won't be able to obtain it until the very end of the game, because it is hidden in Elful, Brace of the Haligdri, and is being guarded by 3 Rotten Crystallians. When it comes to damage output, the broadsword is the greatest non-unique straight sword in Elden Ring. This differentiation has a few drawbacks, since the broadsword has a slightly different moveset and is a little bit shorter than most straight swords in the game. Although it mostly comes down to personal preference, many people don't like the heavy attack's lack of a thrust. The broadsword is available for you if all you want are stats on a stick, and it's also simple to use. The weapon belongs to the Confessor class by default. However, it can be purchased from the Pneumatic Merchant next to the Coastal Cave in Limgrave at a very early level by any class. One of the paired weapons in Elden Ring is the Ornamental Straight Sword, giving you 2 swords for the price of 1. Golden Tempering. Its weapon skill increases holy damage by a substantial amount and grants you a special strong attack that makes you rush forward and stab repeatedly. Since the Grafted Scion, who typically kills you at the beginning of the game, drops the Ornamental Straight Sword, it also has the distinction of being the first weapon you can obtain in Elden Ring. You can use the Precipice of Anticipation Waygate at the 4 belfries in Liurnia of the Lakes, which is still rather early in your adventure, to return to the starting region if you are unable to destroy them right away. There are only 2 weapons in Elden Ring that may cause the status effect of sleep, and one of them is the Sword of Saint Trina. Your greatest choice is the sword because the other is a torch. If your opponents are resistant to sleep, it will stagger them instead of knocking them out for a brief period of time. Even though many bosses are totally immune to the status effect, those who aren't can still be diminished by it. Due to the fact that most of your opponents won't be stacking resistance against sleep, Saint Trina's sword also performs admirably in PvP. This weapon may actually be obtained rather early, by going to the Forsaken Ruins in Caelid, where it is hidden behind a stonesward barrier. Normally, you wouldn't expect to encounter a weapon with such a unique impact until the endgame. The Sword of Night and Flame, a tool used by ancient astrologers, successfully combines faith and intelligence. Night and Flame stance. Its weapon skill has 2 modes. It can produce a broad beam of magic or a wide sweep of flame. If you invest in the right stat for each choice, they can both be quite effective. Alternatively, you can divide your attention between the 2. Naturally, after you reach New Game Plus and beyond, you'll have enough levels to choose from without having to think about it. To top it all off, you can find the Sword of Night and Flame rather early on in the game in Caria Manor, but you'll have to cross the ramparts to get there because the room is closed.